Coop, we saw yet another smash game from Juwan Jennings on Sunday. How valuable is Jennings to fantasy managers moving forward? Is he a low-end wide receiver 2, or is he somewhere closer to a low-end wide receiver 1?
I think, honestly, low-end wide receiver 1 range. There's a lot of good wide receivers out there, but we have to keep in mind, this Shanahan offense, as good as it is for running backs, is incredible for wide receivers. And we've seen every team that takes this scheme and implements it does the same thing. We've seen it in Miami. We've seen it with the Texans last year, at least. We saw it with the Saints earlier this year. They come in and they use a fullback, and they use a fullback for a ton of snaps. And what that does is it takes the wide receiver 3 out of the game, right? You have 2 wide receivers, a tight end, a running back, and then a fullback playing like 40, 50% of the snaps at times. You've seen Juszczyk out there. He's out there all the time, and that takes the wide receiver 3 out. That's why Ricky Pearsall, unfortunately, put up the goose egg this week. That's why there's no wide receiver 3 for Miami. That's why last year it was all Nico Collins and Tank Dell. In the beginning of the year, it was all Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. And right now, Juwan Jennings is in that role. And if you didn't think he was, Kyle Shanahan came out and said he better be comfortable in that role because he's playing it for the rest of the year. So far, we've seen a couple games where we don't have Brandon Ayuk, a couple games where we don't have Deebo Samuel. And what did Juwan Jennings do in those games? 3 touchdowns, double-digit targets. If you can trade for this guy, I would do it now. It's honestly, to me, too obvious of a trade. I'm not going to make him my trade candidate for today. I'm going with somebody a little less obvious than getting Juwan Jennings right now if you can. I mean, if I have him in a bunch of spots, I wouldn't trade him for anything less than a top 12 RB or, a wide receiver of considerable value, or I guess Brock Bowers.
Yeah, and speaking of Brock Bowers is really my takeaway from today. And you can sort of bring up Brock Bowers, I think, every single week moving forward. George Kittle missed yesterday's game, and I think this is sort of the writing on the wall that Brock Bowers is going to end up becoming the tight end 1 overall. We're going to have Brock Bowers as a tight end 1 overall, and this will be rookie tight ends finishing in that position for back-to-back seasons, which is historically insane. It used to be sort of a profile that we would fade consistently in redraft. Next year in this 2025 class, we actually have several tight ends who could be first-round picks and a couple more who could be second-round picks. It's a really strong tight end class, but there's nobody like Brock Bowers in this upcoming class. Brock Bowers is just remarkable what he's doing. We love seeing these guys getting increased usage post-bye week, because I think that's sort of like a harbinger of things to come. It's like the coaching staff saying, this is what I have, this is what I'm going to do, let's get it going. And Brock Bowers is on his way to becoming, I think, a very high second-round pick, if not a 1-2 turn pick in regular PPR leagues next year, because the edge he's giving you the tight end position is remarkable. 31.3 PPR points on Sunday. 16 targets is the most for a rookie tight end ever in a game. Finishes with 13 catches, 126 yards, and a touchdown. And Coop, he had a 41% target share. That's wild. A 20% target share for a tight end is solid. A tight end getting a 41% target share is insane. And there's no reason that this should slow up. Now we've got multiple injuries on the Raiders when it comes to the running back position. They're very pass happy. Gardner Minshew is back behind center, and Minshew sort of understands the assignment. He's going to get the ball in Brock Bowers' hands. And when we start talking about historical numbers, right now, Brock Bowers is 5th all-time in catches by a rookie tight end. Coop, 17 catches from breaking Laporta's record. He might have that in 2 games. And you're talking about he's going to put a real threat into some of these all-time catches records at the receiver position in general for rookies. Bowers is going to finish as the tight end 1 overall this year, and he's going to be the tight end 1 overall, I think, for multiple seasons to come. This is really the best tight end we've ever seen in the NFL for fantasy football purposes. He's 21 years old with this sort of dominant performance.
Right. In redraft, I mean, like, because who else can you make an argument for? George Kittle's banged up, and now with McCaffrey back, that's targets off his plate. There's no way around it. I mean, McCaffrey's been getting peppered with targets since he got back. Jordan Mason had like 12. Travis Kelce's let us down, not just this week, but he also let us down against the 49ers twice within the last few weeks. I mean, Trey McBride can't find the end zone. It's so hard to be the redraft tight end 1 as a rookie. And obviously, if he's the tight end 1 in redraft, that makes him the tight end 1 in Dynasty too, given his age, right? So for me, Brock Bowers locked in. You and I were saying it. He's the, basically, Jordy Nelson, but stronger. Rob Gronkowski said it earlier this year after like 2 games. Rob Gronkowski said, I think this guy is the best tight end already. So incredible, man. I also, you know what, we can't just sit here in victory lap. I do got to eat a little bit of crow. I mean, the joke I sent out, the tweet I sent out was more of a joke. I said Josh Downs will still have upside on the plays where Anthony Richardson gets 2 times, which, I mean, come on, that's funny. But I was worried that Joe Flacco was the only one that could get the ball to Josh Downs. I was worried that Anthony Richardson might not be that great of a passer, might not be that good of a fantasy asset right now, but he came out this week. He got 8 targets to Pittman. He got a couple of those deep shots at Alec Pierce, you know, the hit or miss ones. But he did get 5 catchable targets, all 5 of which were caught to Josh Downs. He had 80-plus yards. He scored the touchdown. Obviously, it's not Joe Flacco, 8, 9 target games, high tempo. But Josh Downs, I guess, still is going to remain on the menu. So if you held on to him, good for you. If you started him, good for you. And Anthony Richardson is still available. I checked Sleeper. I checked Yahoo. I checked ESPN. In the deeper leagues, he's rostered, but under 50% in a lot of those leagues. So shout out for Anthony Richardson coming back and just sticking it to everybody with a good game. 2 rushing touchdowns. Second time in his career he's had 2 rushing touchdowns. A very short career, obviously, because he hasn't played a lot of snaps both last year or this year. So Anthony Richardson, the upside is still there. You have to admit, and you have to be happy for the guy, because I don't know who out there is rooting against these guys, but it just, your life is going to be so much easier when it comes to young and rookie quarterbacks, especially for your football team, when you just take the side of optimism. The glass can be half full. And then if these guys end up not being good 3-4 years down the road, then you can be negative. There's no reason to be negative right from the rip. Let's root for these guys. Anthony Richardson, back on the menu.
Yeah, I love it. And Anthony Richardson, that touchdown run at the end of the game, it was one of those situations where you knew that the run from Richardson was coming. Right. The Jets knew it was coming, and they couldn't stop it. It sort of was like a Cam Newton-like moment for him. Really looked awesome on that play. I love that you brought up the Josh Downs. They sort of have a connection. And Josh Downs, we were so worried about Richardson kind of taking over. The passing statistics were actually much better for him in terms of completion percentage this past game. He's never going to be an 80% completion guy, but he's going to do just enough getting the ball to Downs to keep defenses honest. Jonathan Taylor, Anthony Richardson, this team is suddenly fun again, and we love sort of the circus. But yeah, Anthony Richardson's a guy you really definitely want to root for. And speaking of quarterback rushing efficiency, it's crazy what we're seeing out of the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, Saquon Barkley is having one of the best seasons imaginable. He's at like 440 yards away from setting the all-time record for rushing yardage by a Philadelphia Eagle. And right now, the Eagles have Jalen Hurts with 11 rushing scores and Saquon Barkley with 10 rushing scores. They have 2 out of the top 5 rushing touchdown leaders in football. It's absolutely wild to me that Philadelphia is just this efficient with touchdown runs. And it's been a detriment to the passing game as well. They've really been committed to this. Jalen Hurts doesn't get enough talk here. Sort of for weeks and weeks and weeks, we've been talking about the Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry combination, just how dominant it is. But Coop, I think moving forward for the rest of the season, I might rather have the Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley combination. These 2 guys are just so locked in terms of their efficiency and their production. Jalen Hurts has a higher touchdown rate this year than he did last year. Last year, he ties for the all-time record with 15 rushing touchdowns. This year, he has 11 already. It's just remarkable how efficient he is. And Barkley, like, there's really nothing to say about Barkley. Barkley is just incredible. All of the multi-touchdown games that he's had this year, Barkley is just on another level right now. I love what I'm seeing out of Philadelphia. This team is getting great momentum heading into the fantasy football playoffs. And when we talk about fantasy football playoff schedules, they have a very tricky game against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is no joke. That would be sort of the first round of the fantasy playoffs. But if you can get to week 16 and week 17, they have the Washington Commanders, a team they just had success against, and Washington is allowing the most rushing yardage of any team in football. And then week 17, they have the Dallas Cowboys, who could be playing for like a top 3 draft pick at that point and are really kind of throwing in the towel. And we just saw Philadelphia roll them. So I love what we're seeing out of Hurts and Barkley. I think these 2 are just set for fantasy success for the rest of the season.
I had an opportunity in the SiriusXM host league to start my draft with AJ Brown, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, and Devonta Smith, and I chickened out. It was right there for me. I knew Jim Bowden wasn't going to take the Eagles at the swing. I took AJ Brown and Saquon. It came back to me, and I couldn't pull the trigger on Jalen Hurts. I did take Devonta Smith on the way back, but I couldn't do it. Wish I did it. If I could have just started the Eagles every week, would have been loaded up. I got to ask you, Theo, let's say hypothetically, because we were talking, you and I have been talking about our favorite teams to watch, right? Let's say hypothetically the AFC conference championship is Bengals against Ravens, which has been fireworks. And let's say the NFC is Eagles against the hottest team in football, the Lions. What would you want that Super Bowl to look like out of those? Because I think those matchups would be incredible entertainment value. What would you want to see the big game out of those 4 teams?
I'm dying to see a big NFC championship game with Detroit in it again, where they're sort of like in the last year they were the role of like the hunters. Now they're going to sort of be the hunted. But right. Detroit to me is just on a collision course with the Super Bowl. That team is so good. The margin of victory is so incredible. Cincinnati, every game is just incredibly lit. That's going to be a high-scoring, fun game. But in terms of like the moment, in terms of what a Super Bowl would mean to a city and a fan base, it's got to be the Lions this year. I think it's their year. Yeah. They're just tremendous. I've never seen a team do this in terms of points for and points against. Their margin of victory is wild right now.
I just got goosebumps thinking about Lions, Bengals, Super Bowl, man. That would be fireworks. And, 2 teams that everybody's, dog the Lions, the Cincinnati Bengals. Like, it'd be nice to sit back and say, hey, you know what? One of these fan bases is going to get something, right? So that would be a nice one.
Coop, let's do it right now. What is your Super Bowl prediction and who wins it?
That's it now for me. It has to be Lions, Bengals, and I'm going to go with the Lions. They're just the most complete team in football, but I'd love to see Lions, Bengals.
Okay, so for me, I think it's actually going to be a game that I don't necessarily think is going to be a great one, but I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers might come out of the AFC with this and get demolished by the Lions in the Super Bowl. It might be a Pittsburgh coming out of the AFC and just get steamrolled by Detroit. They lose by 20.
Steelers, man, that's the team of destiny. That's the team of destiny. So I could see it, man. Mike Tomlin, he's the where is my here we go. The standard.
There you go.
The standard is the standard, bro.
Practically twins. Just to get completely galaxy brain here, like Kansas City loses to Buffalo yesterday. Buffalo is very good, but Buffalo doesn't like put the fear into you. They're not as good, I think, as some previous iterations of the Bills. They just are 9-2, very well coached. Obviously, Josh Allen, and then
very bad division.
Very, very bad division. And you got these teams like Baltimore who can't stop anybody. The Chargers, who I don't see them making that big of a run in Harbaugh's first year. So Denver, rookie quarterback. So I just think that everything's sort of shaping up for an ugly AFC playoffs, where on the flip side, the NFC playoffs is going to be absolute wars, and Lions are built to run through very good teams in consecutive weeks. So for me, I think that we could get a shock out of the AFC, but I think it's going to be Detroit. So I can't wait to do fantasy playoff
that's going to be
contests with you, all that good stuff.
We'll load up on FFPC. Well, I'll say, so what we're getting ahead of ourselves talking real playoffs. Let's talk a little fantasy playoffs. My guy to trade for, we've already talked about the running schedule for James Conner. How, it's the Patriots, it's the Panthers, it's the Rams. It's very good. And also for Trey Benson for your waiver stashes, right? On the pass side, there's a couple good schedules out there. Now, the Giants have a good schedule, but we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. Whether it's, for those that haven't seen the news, Daniel Jones is now benched. They're going to go with Tommy DeVito. We could get into the contract implications and all that stuff, whether it's going to be DeVito, whether it's going to be Drew Lock. We can't really go there. On the flip side, I actually kind of it's hard to say but I don't mind what I'm seeing out of Will Levis. And the schedule for the Titans down the stretch here is Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Jacksonville again. That is a nice passing schedule. So the guy I'm looking to trade for right before the deadline is Calvin Ridley. And luckily, just this week, in what wasn't really a great matchup for him, he didn't really pop. So he's still affordable. He's still a guy you can go out and get. He's the clear top dog on this team. Nick Westbrook-Akine is playing a bunch of sacrificial X snaps over there. So give me Calvin Ridley if you can trade. That's an affordable player that has a really good schedule.
No, I love that one. And he's very affordable. Mine is sort of in the same argument, but will cost you more. Mike Evans is back on the practice field today, Coop, the time we're recording. So Evans is back practicing. Evans has missed several weeks in a row, but Mike Evans last year had a 24.5% target share. Evans last year had pretty much everything you'd want to see. He was number 6 in air yard share, number 1 in air yards, number 1 in deep targets, top 15 in red zone targets, ends up with almost 80 catches, and then he was 10th in receiving yards, or 9th, in receiving yards last year. And he finishes as the wide receiver 10 overall. This year, Chris Godwin got off to the red hot start. And Evans was sitting there at about 19.5% target share when he went down with an injury. Now you have Mike Evans returning to a Tampa Bay team that Liam Cohen, there's rumors that he might end up being the head coach in Tampa Bay, that they might move on from Todd Bowles. Obviously, Liam Cohen seems like a guy who knows what he's doing, sort of a fast riser, McVay tree guy. Over the past few weeks, though, we've seen all these targets to the running backs. We've seen Cade Otton take a step forward. That's not what they want to do. I think they want to have an alpha wide receiver as their primary target. Mike Evans steps right back into it and gives you, I think, low-end wide receiver 1 production for the rest of the season. We already know that he has a real connection with Baker Mayfield, and Tampa Bay is still playing for they have a shot of making the playoffs and winning that division. But it's the outside motivation as well with Evans, where he's chasing 1,000-yard season. If he has another 1,000-yard season this year, then he's only trailing Jerry Rice in terms of consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. It's been a remarkable career for him. Coop, he's only at 335 receiving yards. So don't think in the back of your mind that that's not going to be a motivating factor, not only for him, but for Baker Mayfield to help him chase that record. I think we're going to see him rip off a number of 100-yard performances. And it's sort of hey, this guy had a hamstring injury. He's coming back from injury. Maybe I'm willing to make a trade. I think for redraft, and I think in Dynasty, Mike Evans is a guy that if you still have trades in your league, go make an offer for Mike Evans, see what he costs, and I think go ahead and get him. He's going to be much cheaper now than he would be in 2 weeks.
Yep, and I'll tell you, if you don't think this matters to these guys, Tyreek Hill was set on 2,000 yards last year, and he talked about it all the time. I watched Antonio Brown one time get a pass, Theo, thrown to him on a play where the Steelers could have just taken a knee and ended the game against the Jaguars, and it was only a 7-point game. They could have taken a knee and run out the clock. They threw a pass to Antonio Brown because he had some stupid record going of 5 catches for 50 yards consecutive games, which he did for 30-something games in a row, which is insane. It's 3 seasons. These guys do care about that stuff. And he's looking at it and he's saying, I need 7 100-yard games in a row. Let's do it. Right? And he gets the Panthers twice, and he gets the Raiders, and he gets the Saints with no Marshawn Lattimore. He's looking at that schedule and he's like, yeah, no problem. Business as usual. So I'm fully with you. I love that. If we're looking ahead, so that's looking ahead to fantasy playoffs. If we're looking at just this week, my hammer this week for DFS, and obviously if you're setting your lineups, is Kareem Hunt. I just look at this Carolina Panthers team, and I look at the Kansas City Chiefs coming off a loss to the Buffalo Bills, where they were kind of going through the motions in a lot of these games. My thought process, you're not in the locker room, you're not part of them, but it looked a little bit like, let's cruise. It's lazy ball. I think that they come back here after losing their first game of the year, and they put a whooping on this Panthers team. And it would be nice to see them do it. They don't need to run up the score the way that Dan Campbell and the Lions like to do, but I think it's going to be a day for Kareem Hunt to get things done, knowing that they have Isaiah Pacheco in their back pocket, and they can just, that they have somebody that's going to come along and help them out down the stretch. I think they're going to lean heavily on Hunt.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting one. And I've heard the argument on both sides of the coin where Pacheco is going to come back and sort of relegate Hunt, and it's going to be a similar Pacheco usage to when he went down to injury with the older back sort of mixing in. But I don't know, Coop. I think this could end up being a committee backfield. I love your call that Hunt's going to go smash, but I think it's going to make this coaching staff, they don't have enough offensive weapons to not utilize Hunt as productive as he's been. And I know there's efficiency people out there, a number of analytical Twitter handles and analysts who are like, Hunt's actually kind of underperforming based on what he's doing in terms of, the efficiency numbers are not what we'd want to see, but it's the overall stats and the willingness of Kansas City to continually go back to him in key situations. I don't think they put that away. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a committee, but I love him smashing this week against Carolina. I love that one.
And he has underperformed efficiency-wise, but you can't underperform against the Panthers.
This is true. I think you could go out there and run for 55 yards and a touchdown if you had to against Carolina right now, Coop.
Before the bad injury happens, I think.
Yes,
it would only take me a couple plays.
Before the hit, you'd roll off a big one, Fud.
I would have to get some pitches where I go out of bounds. Maybe a couple jet sweeps so I can get down out of bounds.
I don't know if you want that jet sweep. I don't know if you want that one. Maybe like a little dump off out of the backfield. Maybe, I think that would be more right up your alley. The jet sweep, a lot of bad things could happen on that play.
Right. For me, you got to get around the end.
I got to go with one, and people in the chat, let me know if this is just a pathetic hammer to back this week. But we've seen Christian McCaffrey back-to-back weeks giving you solid numbers, but nothing spectacular. 16.7 points in week 10 and 14.6 in week 11. Coop, this is a team desperately in need of a big win on the road in Green Bay. This is a team that needs really multiple wins coming up to get a little momentum back. Seattle game was disappointing. You've got Green Bay here on the road, a matchup that we saw last year in the playoffs. And the last time Christian McCaffrey went up against Green Bay, he had 2 rushing touchdowns. He had 7 catches, absolutely smashed. I think we see a 25 to 30 point Christian McCaffrey week, and I think he sort of gets it going. Green Bay and Buffalo away, they've got to, like, at the very least, split those 2 games. They can't go 0-2 in these 2. This will be catastrophic. And if they can get by this little stretch, they've got Chicago, they've got the Rams, they've got the Dolphins, and then Coop, that big Week 17 matchup against Detroit, they might have to win that one, depending on how these games go. So San Francisco really, really needs to get this one in Green Bay. This is a game they can't mess around with. Been a disappointing team this year in terms of wins and losses, but I think they go on the backs of Christian McCaffrey this week and get a big win on the road.
Yeah, I mean, they got to win that division. Arizona's out front, and they just lost to the Seahawks. Yeah. And I'll tell you, if you traded for Christian McCaffrey, good job. Because, I mean, they clearly waited until he was not just healthy, but fully ready, conditioning-wise, to play his usual workload. And he's essentially played 90% of the snaps in these games. Jordan Mason's getting 3 snaps, 2 snaps. Christian McCaffrey's getting 5 targets, 7 targets. Like, he is back. He is CMC. So I love that hammer, man. Again, you got to spend $10,000 on DFS or whatever it is, but might be worth it. The way no one's getting rolled out like that.
100%. And we'll 100% be back here next week. Coop and I are going to get you going. We're going to help you win your fantasy playoffs right here. Coop, anything going on this week?
Yeah, I mean, as always, articles over at Fantasy Alarm, videos on the Fantasy Alarm YouTube. I'll be on SiriusXM Thursday night, Friday night, and Sunday as always. What about you, brother?
You can find all my work over Player Profiler and Fantasy Points, all my podcasts. Most of them are Player Profiler, School of Scott with Scott Barrett over at Fantasy Points every single week. And then my article in The Athletic. We're grinding. This is the time of year we're really pushing. We'll see you next week.